Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. I've got a fairly powerful voice, and I'm mic'd, so that it'll be on that thing, even if it isn't. Interesting title. I decided to have some fun. Railroad Track and Moravian Pottery, and adventures in replacing water lines. We've got something like 15,000 feet of water line to replace in Christiansted. We're approaching 1,000 feet of it done at this point in time in almost 3 months. The poor guys out there are digging through solid rock half the time, and it's just miserable digging. But why I was put on this job is this. It's a federally funded project through the EPA. With the EPA and any other federal project, you're required by the Historic Preservation Act of 1966 as amended to have a monitoring archaeologist out there if you're within a National Register district. Now in Christiansted there are 3 of these lying one on top of the other. The small one here is the National Parks Service. Nobody worries about them because they do it right 99.99999% of the time. The green line outside of that is the Christiansted Architectural Control District that was established in the mid-1950s in an attempt to preserve parts of the architecture of this town. It's got a very interesting boundary. It's obviously there for political reasons. And what is noticeably missing is all the vernacular structures. This deals largely with the large structures of the merchants and their houses and their places of business are inside that. And that has been under the control of the Historic Preservation Commission now for 60 years. Outside of that, in the red line, is the Christiansted National Historic District on the National Register of Historic Places. This was established in the mid-70s, and this is why I'm out there. That district requires, by federal law, if you're digging in it, an archaeologist working in it, making sure that you don't dig up things that you shouldn't be digging up. A few of you will remember a couple years ago when I worked on the Company Street section of this, we found some interesting things. And this time, we have actually started way, way down here by the cemetery. We tried going up this street, that's solid rock. We've now gone all the way along here to Prince Street, and we're coming back in front of St. Mary's School today. And they've been working on that all of this week so that that will be done by the time the school opens. The problem we keep on running into, nobody knows what's beneath these streets. Sewer lines keep on showing up where they're not expected, water lines. WAPA doesn't even know what it has as water lines buried down there because remember, WAPA got the water lines in the 80s. Public Works had them before that, and there were no maps made. And we keep finding water lines where they're not supposed to be. And so this is what's happening. This is phase 2 of what we've done. The deep purple up here was phase 1. But as you can see, we're going all over the town. All the old ductile iron lines are being replaced with 6-inch PVC, or in some cases 4-inch, depending on the demand on that street. But they're working on this. The interesting is things like Prince Street, where we've come to, right behind the convent at Hill Street. We had to cross the street because they put in the power lines for St. Mary's School about 3 years ago. I monitored that too. But coming up Prince Street are underground high voltage cables. 13,000 volts in PVC conduit, yes, hopefully encased in concrete. And there is also part of the VI NGN network is coming up Prince Street. So I think they decided that let's deal with the school first before we cross that street with all the problems. Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority, this is their plan. There is one major problem with it. There is no reference on there to the stream beds that are coming down through town. There are 3 or 4 of them, depending on where you are. And they are in beautiful culverts. And I think WAPA thought it was just going to bulldoze those culverts and put the pipes in and then do something. I said, no, you're not going to do that. You can't do that. You'll lose your federal grant if you do that, and you'll also flood the town. You know, that's just not useful, but that's what happened. It's going to be fun. The biggest one is probably this one right here on Hospital Street, going across here. The next biggest one was up here on Company Street, which we've already passed. Very luckily, we got both the sewer line and the water line past it without damaging it. That culvert is 6 feet high and 8 feet wide, and it's beautiful brick masonry. And there are several more of those in town. I think Mr. Samuel, when he sat down with me, was not happy when I said, you can't do the damage to these. He's got to figure out how to get under them. I mean, it's easy enough with directional boring and things like that, but so that's why I'm out there. 15,000 feet of pipe going through a historic district. You got to find out what was there. And it's actually turned out to be quite interesting. Anybody recognize that fence? It's which cemetery? It's next to the Jewish cemetery. It's the Moravian cemetery. And those posts are all railroad track. You know, I went out there and I said, yeah, they've got some of the old Bethlehem track that they've turned into fence posts when they abandoned that system. And this is the, as I said, that's East Street with the pipe already in place on it. So that's the edge of the Moravian church. There's the Moravian pottery. I've been pulling a lot of Moravian pottery from that area and a few other spots in Christiansted in the thing. Moravian pottery is a redware-based thing. It's all red clay. And it's got this green and yellow drawings on it because the Moravians, when they were sent out here, in other words, to educate the enslaved, all Moravian missions are supposed to be self-supporting. The ones here never succeeded at that. But a lot of this pottery has either come from Denmark or North Carolina, where there are very successful Moravian potteries. And we're trying to figure out which one's which. There is a whole tray of Moravian pottery on the side there that you can look at. Somebody used that piece a little bit too much. It's just been beaten up. But this is early 19th century standard white ceramic plate. That's, I mean, it literally is pitted beyond belief. And then, of course, they were eating meat, nice cut bone. The marrow is gone from that because the marrow is the most nutritious part of any bone. Okay, what's underneath these streets? First of all, that's a 12-inch PVC water line that was put in years ago. That was the purple line. But if you look on the left-hand photograph, right above the purple line on it, you will see a lime cement street surface. This is on West Street, right down next to the cemetery. And then, of course, on top of that is the modern asphalt. The other one, there are some stones in this area. Here, there were probably a swale when the Danes put this stuff in, because the Danes were very careful about water control in this town. This picture was taken 2 days ago. We're talking about 3 feet of surface there, but you can see the top asphalt layer, a good foot of fill, another asphalt layer, and this time it's a concrete surface. This is in front of St. Mary's School, the gate we all used to go into the playground. There is right behind me when I'm taking this photograph. So it is very interesting to see what's happened here, because there is, again, natural soil at the bottom. They put in a weak concrete, probably a late 19th century concrete, because even though the Romans had concrete, it did not come back into the Western culture until the mid-19th century. And then what this gets to be is very interesting, because that's taken about 20 feet to the right of that other photograph, and you see the same surfaces. And what you see to the very far right is the culvert that runs down Prince Street. The U.S. government, in its engineering wisdom, played around with a lot of our streets, Prince Street being one of them, because that is actually a gut running down about 3 blocks of that street. It comes all the way down from just below Mount St. Mary's, goes through the houses, comes onto the street just north or just below East Street, and then it used to run on the surface. And then the Danes, not the Danes, but the Americans decided to build a big 2-foot deep culvert along one side of that takes the water down to some Danish culverts at Company Street. But, of course, these haven't been cleaned in years. I'm waiting to see how they get under this thing. It's 10 feet wide, and they've got to be down 4 feet to get under it. It's a real mess of a job. And so, it's just a lot of fun being out there. I mean, I've been out there since June 1st, basically, trying to get this done. WAPA did not realize they had to do any of these permitting processes or have monitors there. Nor does Waste Management, or does the electric department of WAPA, who's got to put in conduits to put stuff underground. The really amusing part about this is that in December, the Virgin Islands legislature passed and Governor Mapp signed a dig once law. So the 3 trenches that are being dug out there should all be dug at one time. They've got to do a little engineering to make sure the sewer water and the potable water stay apart, and none of that gets into the electric system. But basically, we're going to pay $1 million in asphalt 3 times for the same surfaces. They're probably going to have to pay me 3 times because I've got to be out there every time. And that's just, I mean, it's great for my pocketbook, but that's not what we've got to worry about here. It's where is this money coming from, and why can't we get the government to work together in a unified fashion and actually look ahead of their stuff. But that plan Does not include all the manholes, does not include all the storm drainage, does not include a lot of the issues that we're facing now as to where these pipes are going. Last week, or this week, digging in front of St. Mary's School, they were able to dig about 100 feet of trench the first morning, and suddenly realized they have the 8-inch sewer line, 8-inch PVC sewer line, coming out of St. Mary's, running right down that trench. They had to abandon the trench, backfill it, redesign it, because of the lack of knowledge. Back on Hill Street, we were digging and we had 2 water lines in the street. WAPA said both of them were active until we found one with a big hole in it, and it was full of air. Guess what? That pipe got cut and replaced. So the issue here comes down to years of putting this stuff in and leaving it in people's head. There are no plans. This is as good a plan as we've got. I'm hoping they produce something better that was actually the as-built. Not my department, but that's where it is. I'm going to open it up to questions now.
David, what's the earliest things you have found? What date?
The earliest materials that I have found so far on this project is the Moravian material that dates to the 1770s. It came out with them at that point in time. Yes?
Hi, David, forgive me if I'm being naive, but the dig once law, if it's been signed into law, okay, I'm being naive.
Thank you.
But I mean, do we have no redress? I mean, this is crazy.
I managed to get a meeting with Administrator Sanes, sitting around a table in Government House. I was the only non-government employee there. We had National Park Service, Virgin Islands State Historic Preservation Office, let's see, then it was me, then to my left was Waste Management, on the other side was Power Department of WAPA, and next to that was Public Works. And the answer was, we're trying to do this, but we've got grants that are all under time constraints.
So it's piss poor planet.
You said it. Yes, Todd?
David, tell us about the vaults. I don't think people realize how impressive they are and when they were built, you think. For example, the one that crosses Company Street, it starts up at kind of Freecut.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a massive structure underground. Who built it and when?
That would have been built probably by enslaved Africans early in the 1750s. It's beautiful brick work, and as I said, it's literally 6 feet high and 8 feet wide where it goes under Company Street. And it goes across Company Street underneath, what's it end up? Underneath, it's where, I just lost her name, Rasmussen is. Used to be Barbaroo. They blew out the back of that building. The floor just literally lifted about 15, 18 years ago. And the problem with it at that point, shortly beyond that, this huge culvert goes into 2 18-inch pipes. Anybody care to do the arithmetic? I suggest you don't. But that system goes underneath the post office in Christiansted, underneath the old bathrooms next to the post office, and crosses Queen Street, a little bit smaller, and then runs up across Hill, across East, and then all the way up to the water facilities right next to where you get on the bypass now. Nina?
Actually, on the old Christiansted map, Oxon's map, you can actually see it's all shown
Yeah.
He's got the culverts.
That's the biggest of them. There is
Shown as a completed culvert?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, they're, I mean,
where they are.
in the map just shown as
This-
dotted lines.
There's an amusing one just down here, one block down, where Queen Street comes out and comes into the gut that runs along along the National Park Service lands. And then there's one further up by what I still call the Christiansted Police Station, and I'm sorry, shows you my age. It's the building that they want to turn into the architectural school for this island, for the Danes. It's just on the other side of that. And that comes down from the bypass on that side. The other one is literally goes down Prince Street, underneath Prince Street, then comes up. As that crosses King Street and then runs across sort of surface through Strand Street, down by the government parking lots and out to the sea at the seaplane. And I think, Benito, you've crawled some of these more than I have.
I've made it as far as next to the cadastral.
Yeah.
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 Yes.
Yeah. There's a building on the other side of the street there that should never have been built because it was literally built in the gut. And that intersection in front of the public library has been raised about 4 feet to cover all of this stuff. And the same thing is true at the next intersection along. They've raised these damn streets just at the intersections, not the running streets. But they want to get these pipes underneath there. I mean, it's right next to your building, Todd, you know.
You can actually get into the vault right at the corner of King and King Cross.
Yeah. Yes?
Sounds as though with a series of delays and workarounds and redesigns and so forth, that this is a great setup for the funding to not be sufficient for the whole project. And my question is, will the parts of the system that are installed be functional even if the rest of it is not installed?
I would assume they will be because the construction crew that's coming through has tapped into the existing water lines, into that 12-inch line, and put the necessary feeds off the 6-inch line to the meters where the meters are going to be replaced as we come down the streets. I have no, you know, it's an interesting question because I don't know that WAPA or the DPNR, who technically did the grant through EPA, ever budgeted for my time. And I have no clue what I'm going to charge because it's an hourly rate. There's no way I can tell them what I'm going to charge. I follow the construction crew. And yes, Susan?
Do you think, at the end of this project, that you're going to be equipped to provide us with an underground inventory of Christiansted that we can actually see? Wouldn't that be fascinating?
It's interesting. You know what? There's one slide that didn't appear. What happened to that slide? Excuse me. I went to a great deal of trouble to make one slide, and it seems to have disappeared. Oh, there it is. Whoops. Back one. This is a Google map, a piece of the Google map of Christiansted. The little purple sites are where I have found artifacts. It's really interesting. This one here is over there. A lot of pipe stems. The person who was in that house smoked intensely. This, of course, is the Moravian Cemetery. This is where a lot of the Moravian pottery came from. There's interesting stuff up here because a lot of stuff is washing down these streets to this street because it's the low point. Remember, there's a ridge that runs through here, and then there's another one that comes through here, comes through St. Mary's School. So it's interesting issues about sewer lines and things like this, because sewer lines are gravity fed. Yes?
Any idea when the old pipes were installed?
It was an interesting, right next to one of them, we found a Duraglass bottle that's out of the 60s. So they have been done more than once. Hill Street there has two lines in it. It has an old 2-inch line, which is really old, and then it has a 4-inch line, both of which are ductile iron. And then it gets another 4-inch elsewhere. And you know, this is, ductile iron is material of the 20th century. It's not, you know, before that you used cast iron, and you don't use, cast iron is not a particularly good material for pressurized water lines. Yes, Bob?
David, could you tell us about how the guts and then the large culverts fed the aquifers that the old wells are on top of that are down close to the sea?
Well, not just down close to the sea, but there's a lot of wells along the various guts in Christiansted, because that's where, of course, the water is. When I was a kid, people would swim in the water facilities at the top of King Cross Strait and go up there and get little shrimp and things like this. But it helped. Now those water structures are 1930s, whereas the masonry culverts are at this point in time 270 years old and still working perfectly. Yes, Todd?
I always thought that King Street was paved in the 40s. You're telling me that there was concrete on streets in Christiansted in the 1800s?
I would think so, because it is, on West Street we've got this lime concrete. It's a very, very weak thing. In front of St. Mary's, it really is concrete, but again, it's a cheap concrete. I did not work the King Street projects, so I did not know what they saw as cross sections. I know on Company Street, we did not find any of this. We would find occasional stone areas, which is, I suspect, for, you know, filling in the mud holes and keeping your water above, keeping the wheels above, you know, out of the mud. Yes?
Your government house meeting, you didn't describe participation of anybody from VIA. Does that mean that we face the prospect of, after all this is finished, still having wooden poles and the VIA lines throughout the town?
Yep. VIA thinks it's not VIA has an awful lot of conduit under these streets that's been here since the time of Hugo, at least. And on that street right behind us there, there's I think a bank of 6 conduits. And there's lots of copper wire still underground from the Vitelco days. But VIA is doing nothing towards removing themselves. They're going to be in trouble because they're suddenly going to be responsible for all the utility poles in Christiansted, because the VI law says last utility on the pole is responsible for it. And so
those folks that did the telephone lines and things underground, there's no as-built for those either?
They're hard to get a hold of. When I was working in St. Thomas a few years ago on Main Street, Innovative said, national security, we cannot give you the as-built. And they hit the conduits with the backhoe. They didn't damage them. You know, they destroyed the conduit, but they did not destroy the contents, and they rebuilt it. But, you know, if you choose to say national security, not much I can do. Yeah, Bob?
David, on balance, would you say that they littered less 200 years ago than we do today?
They littered with different materials. We have plastic and things like this. that is far more obvious. They had a lot of broken pottery and metal pieces that are in the streets. And there was a lot of material in the home yards because there was no central trash collection here on this island until the 20th century, mid-20th century. And so all the trash was just in your backyard, which is not uncommon. It happens everywhere. It has nothing to do with, us living here. It just, the easiest way to get rid of trash is throw it out the front door. Okay, thank you very much. And these are the people who I've